we gained our independence in 1979. And following independence, St. Lucia had to be admitted to a number of international organizations. UNESCO was one of them.
They're quite unique in that within the UN system, I think UNESCO is the only UN agency that has national commissions. The idea being that member states, upon becoming members of UNESCO, are required to establish a commission which would, on one hand, assist UNESCO in promoting its work on the ground, and on the other hand, assist the member state in ensuring that its views, its needs are well reflected within UNESCO's programs and within its budget.
February 2nd, 1981. An Act of Parliament establishes the National Commission for UNESCO. The Minister of Education then was Senator Kenny D. Anthony. He became the first chairperson of the National Commission.
Those were really very exciting days. UNESCO was in the mode of expansion in those days, and it was fully funded. So that, for example, governments like the United States plowed millions of dollars into UNESCO. And there was a lot of support for developing countries. At the same time, too, there were a lot of imaginative programs and projects, and it was felt that the best thing to do was to create this commission to provide that kind of mechanism to establish a presence of UNESCO in St. Lucia.
Dr. Anthony's stint as Education Minister and Chairman of the UNESCO National Commission lasted only a few months in 1981, but it laid the foundation for a long and fruitful relationship with UNESCO. Senator Hilary Modest became Education Minister that same year, holding the post for 1 year until 1982, when Senator Margarita Alexander became Minister and consequently Chairperson of the St. Lucia National Commission for UNESCO. It's a designation she held until 1984, making her the third Education Minister to serve between 1981 and 1984. There was one constant throughout that 1981 to 1984 period. Mrs. Aldith Isaac remained Secretary General through the reign of 3 education ministers. But her substantive post was that of Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Education. During that period, 1982 to 1984, her workload lightened a bit as Timothy James became the officer with responsibility for the management of the National Commission. A full-time Secretary General was yet to be appointed. In 1984, then Minister of Education Senator Margarita Alexander began the search for a full-time Secretary General. It ended after a conversation with the then principal of the Castries Comprehensive Secondary School, Ms. Lawrence Laura.
When she spoke to me, she had just returned from a meeting in UNESCO, and she said there was a lot to be done. In the meantime, there had already been a Secretary General who was Mrs. Aldith Isaac, but she was also the permanent secretary. So what she did is she delegated some of the work to different officers within her ministry, like Mr. Poyot and Mr. Timothy James.
Ms. Laura assumed duties November 1984, but had no dedicated office space. A fire at the ministry caused the Department of Culture to be relocated to the Parish Centre. Even then, there was no room for the newly appointed Secretary General of the National Commission for UNESCO.
There was a room left for the Director of Culture who had not yet assumed duties, so I had no office, no desk, nothing, so I went into his office until he arrived.
The inconveniences of not having her own office did not deter an eager Miss Laura. She read all she could about UNESCO, the National Commission, and its mandate. She noticed from correspondence waiting for her attention that the year 1985 was designated as International Year of the Youth, and St. Lucia needed to be part of the observances. As it turned out, 1985 provided the perfect opportunity for the formation of the National Youth Council. A few of the founding members were already actively engaged with the St. Lucia National Commission. Some decided to redirect their energies towards the establishment of the NYC.
Unfortunately for me, but fortunately for the country, during that year, the NYC was launched, and many of the members of my group became active members of the NYC. They were in the forefront. So I just sort of disbanded my committee and allowed them to work with the NYC, which is basically what UNESCO is. UNESCO starts and others finish. That is what I learned when I read all the literature and so on, that it was not the responsibility of the National Commission to do the things, but to initiate it, to get people interested, to act as a catalyst for change.
Another big challenge awaiting the new Secretary General was the launching of the World Decade for Cultural Development. Miss Laura was still running a one-man office. The National Commission was yet to be established.
One of the first things I had to do was to activate the National Commission, because the National Commission is not just the Secretary General. The National Commission comprises a group of persons, different committees. There is a sort of a central committee chaired by the Minister for Education.
Subcommissions were eventually established to cover 5 priority areas: education, culture, communication, information and informatics, now known as communication and information, and there was human and social sciences as well as the pure sciences. Miss Laura ensured that practitioners of the various fields were integrally involved in all the subcommittees.
You had the Ministry of Agriculture, you had the Ministry of Planning, you had, most of the Ministry of Health. These are the ministries where you have all the scientists. Mm-hmm. So the people on my committee came primarily from, these ministries.
That was the strategy used by Miss Laura in the initial years to get the wider community and key interest groups to buy into the focus of the National Commission. She made do with whatever human or financial resources were available.
Well, I'm someone who always believes in changing negatives into positives. So the fact that I did not have an office, the fact that I had no help, no assistance, forced me to think outside of the box, think creatively, and I used the resources which were in the community, anybody whom I knew.
She was a tireless worker in terms of the National Commission, getting the National Commission fully established, fully functional.
In 1984 began a 15-year stint for Mr. Louis George as Education Minister. This long term allowed the National Commission to settle.
His stint for nearly 15 unbroken years really laid the foundation stone for the UNESCO National Commission. And a lot of the activities and programs of the Commission really started during that period.
Yeah, Mr. Louis George was the longest serving chairperson of the National Commission for UNESCO. So a lot of the foundation work, I think, started under his stewardship. He worked alongside Ms. Laura, and for about 12 years or so, they were the face of the National Commission, the face of UNESCO in St. Lucia.
He has an outstanding period of achievement because, as you know, he was the longest serving Minister of Education in St. Lucia. I think probably served some 13 to 14 years as Minister of Education. So if you look at his portfolio, there is no doubt that you can see some outstanding contribution by him. And it is to his credit that he maintained the momentum of the work of the Commission over the years.
And I think credit must be given to him for the successes that the Commission were able to realize over the years. A lot has to do with the foundation which he laid during his 15 years as chairperson.
In those initial years, 15 schools joined the UNESCO Associated Schools Project Network, popularly known as ASP.NET. That program was started under the chairmanship of Education Minister Louis George.
In fact, one of the major successes of the National Commission, which is the ASP.NET Associated Schools Project Network, was started again under his tenure and developed immensely during that period.
30 years later, the number of schools affiliated to the ASP.NET stands at 28. ASP.NET is being used by UNESCO to promote its key core values:
peace, democracy, tolerance, understanding of diversity and differences, and so on.
St. Lucia has been doing exceptionally well with its ASP.NET project. It is second to Trinidad and Tobago in terms of the size of the network. One person has been responsible for making it the success it has been. Cynthia Joseph sadly passed away recently.
She really was the backbone of the ASP.NET in St. Lucia and made a tremendous contribution to its development and to its success. So we remember her for that exceptional contribution.
I think she is a personality that we can celebrate, and for her memory, because the number of things that she did, her commitment from what I know, because as a teacher herself, her commitment to that process, I think is commendable, and I think I just want to recognize her myself.
It became clear that to maximize the benefits from UNESCO, St. Lucia would need to have strong representation at headquarters in Paris. In 1995, a decision was taken by then Foreign Affairs Minister George Mallet to establish a permanent mission. Since then, its record of performance has been exemplary. The mission is headed by Gilbert Shaguri, St. Lucia's permanent delegate to UNESCO.
He's a goodwill ambassador. He's not being paid. He has his staff. And St. Lucia also has a permanent member, a representative on UNESCO, which helps to push St. Lucia's agenda during conferences and during meetings of UNESCO.
In fact, a very vibrant permanent delegation in Paris. Persons who, up to now, St. Lucia pays not $1 for their services, but doing extremely good work. Ms. Vera Lacoy, who runs the office in Paris. The number of campaigns she had to wage, all so that this small speck of dust, so to speak, could gain a place on the management and leadership of one of the major international bodies in the world.
St. Lucia is known in the corridors of UNESCO like anything. And that is what I always found as well, because we have a very strong personal representative who is there on the ground that really fights for St. Lucia.
Countries from far and wide come to St. Lucia to ask for support for their candidates. I mean, during my tenure as Prime Minister, I've had visitors from Saudi Arabia. We didn't even have diplomatic relations with Saudi Arabia, yet they came to St. Lucia to ask for support from St. Lucia.
Among those establishing St. Lucia's high profile at UNESCO headquarters in Paris were the permanent delegate Gilbert Shaguri, Mrs. Vera Lacoy, and Sir Leighton Thomas, Vice Chairperson, UNESCO Executive Board during the period 1998 and 2001.
Not only did he represent us on the board, he was also representing the region as the vice chair of the board.
Not only was Mr. Leighton Thomas elected, but we got, in fact, more votes for our candidate than everybody else. Of course, one is not to downplay the significance of the profile of Mr. Leighton Thomas himself. I mean, he was a very good candidate who had a very good CV that impressed a lot of persons, so that don't think it was just other people who did the work. Mr. Thomas's, or now Sir Leighton Thomas's CV and his own background in education and so on did count for something in terms of enabling us to get elected to the executive board.
We have had distinguished and outstanding representation by our permanent representative to UNESCO, Ambassador Gilbert Shaguri. He single-handedly, through that mission, has been able to established an extraordinary reputation, not just for the Commission here, but also for St. Lucia.
St. Lucia's high-profile and powerful presence in the corridors of UNESCO headquarters were used to full effect in making a case for the Peters Management Area to be designated as a World Heritage Site. That process began in the late 1990s with the efforts of the National Trust and Giles Romulus. This required all the lobbying power the permanent delegation in Paris could summon. The hard work had paid off. On June 30th, 2004, St. Lucia's Peters Management Area gained World Heritage status.
We were virtually doing a countdown that, okay, we've secured the support now of 5 more territories, and 5 more, and 5 more, and eventually, as we neared the finish line, it became apparent that we were going to gain that status, and yes, we eventually did.
While I was there, the most important development was the Peters Management Area becoming a World Heritage Site. It didn't happen when I started. This is a process that took years, many years. It happened even from the time of Ms. Laurent and my predecessors who carried the work.
I'm not sure sometimes whether people understand how significant that is. I mean, what it does, it puts St. Lucia on the world map as one of the territories in the world with a site of major international and cultural significance. That is what World Heritage status is about. It says that this country or this particular location in this country is a place of immense international significance in terms of heritage and culture.
Remaining on the list has been challenging, and I think education is extremely important in ensuring that we remain a World Heritage Site.
The National Commission for UNESCO has secured support for a number of initiatives that impact on the lives of the youth of St. Lucia. One such intervention involved the Upton Gardens Girls Center, where UNESCO funded an interactive learning resource center. It focused on illiteracy and behavioral issues.
And in dealing with the behavioral issues, you want to provide them with skills so that they can go on and live healthy and productive lives, but there's a literacy barrier. So the learning methodologies that we have in our schools, they don't work for them. It is extremely fascinating, the work that they've been able to do with the funds that was provided. Not a lot of funding, but they were very creative in how they were able to acquire the equipment that they needed to allow the students to learn in an interactive and fun way. And I think that's one of the programs that I'm extremely proud of.
The National Youth Council, too, has benefited significantly from UNESCO-funded initiatives. The National Commission has been able to reserve special funding from what it termed participation projects for NYC initiatives.
We have also developed a very, very good working relationship with the National Youth Council. And I think it is perhaps the 3rd or 4th year that we have made it a priority to ensure that when we submit participation programs, that one of them is reserved for youth development.
A significant amount of the financial commitment from UNESCO goes towards capacity building for the NYC. Science fairs over the years have been supported by the St. Lucia National Commission. That relationship goes way back to the first efforts over 2 decades ago to mobilize the science community.
I know they have sponsored the science fair. They have also sponsored competitions in mathematics for the schools and so on. So whenever UNESCO decides to assist, it has always been very appreciated and grateful.
Deficiencies in mathematics have also been tackled through the National Commission. A mathematics project was launched to improve the performance of secondary school students in geometry through the use of graph boards and Geometer's Sketchpad.
the schools are encouraged to use the technology to teach the children math, because children relate to technology very well, and math continues to challenge our students. So the use of the technology to allow them to understand math better, make sense of it.
UNESCO had, prior to my being minister, had what is known as the Joint School Mathematics Project. And during my tenure, that was resuscitated. And we sought to bring mathematics alive, because we realized that mathematics is very important, especially for further education.
UNESCO's support for media is evident at Radio St. Lucia and the community radio station established in Soufrière. The community radio concept was born out of a desire to give the people of Soufrière an avenue for local dissemination of information.
The idea being that you want to have within the community a radio which will promote the community, which will serve as a means of educating your populace, allowing persons also to have access to disseminate information, whether it be on health, whether it be on education, whether it be on tourism, which is of course very important to the community of Soufrière.
Radio St. Lucia has benefited from UNESCO's funding of equipment purchases and training for its staff. The music of St. Lucia's Queen of Culture, Cécile Descartes, has been preserved thanks to the support of UNESCO and its National Commission. The album entitled Cécile, St. Lucia's First Lady of Folk, featured songs celebrating the two major flower festivals, La Waz and La Marguerite. The critical issue of safeguarding of the works of St. Lucia's most decorated creators have been a key area of interest for the National Commission. The collection of works of St. Lucian poet and playwright Roderick Walcott has been preserved through a UNESCO participation program project. Subsequently, the collection of the works of Roderick Walcott was inscribed on the regional memory of the world.
We eventually were able to convince her that we would find a proper repository for the work of her husband, and this is now the Open Campus, UE Open Campus, who has all the collection of his work. So that was it was a lot of work, but it was so satisfying in the end that we were able to bring and then to see that we are conserving something, preserving something that is of value to the people of St. Lucia.
Having that collection established at UE, I think, is extremely significant. It doesn't just speak to the fact that culture is important, the fact that we have to recognize the work of our own. It also lends a support to another major area of work of UNESCO, which is the memory of the world.
There was the inscription of Sir William Arthur Lewis' papers on the International Memory of the World Register. That happened in 2009. There was the official launching of St. Lucia National Memory of the World Register as part of the Nobel Laureate Week.
Sir Arthur Lewis's papers are inscribed on the International Memory of the World as well. So these, I think, are very important programs that we have been able to facilitate.
I'm really pleased this year that UNESCO has partnered with the Nobel Laureate Week Committee in celebrating the life of St. Lucia's first Nobel Laureate, Sir William Arthur Lewis. This year is, of course, a very special year for us, as we are celebrating, in fact, the whole world is celebrating with us the centenary of the birth of our first Nobel Laureate. So our thanks to UNESCO and the wonderful work the National Commission for UNESCO in St. Lucia has been doing in partnering with us with the Nobel Laureate Week Committee to celebrate this momentous occasion.
St. Lucia has benefited significantly from UNESCO, with beneficiaries coming from all sectors of society, from at-risk youth to education, science and technology to culture, media and the preservation of national treasures.
Everything I've seen confirms how correct it was to establish a commission. Every Minister of Education from 79 onwards has had reason to be proud of the work of the Commission.
We have over the years been able to benefit from UNESCO in all of those 5 areas: education, science, culture, human and social science, and information and communication.
UNESCO is heavily under-resourced. The United States has withdrawn financial support for UNESCO, and so the resources that UNESCO attract are not as significant as in the past. The result is that they have had to reduce on the programs to many developing countries. That is very unfortunate, and I hope the time will come again when the United States can develop confidence in UNESCO and can in fact rejoin UNESCO and provide those resources.
Here are the education ministers who served with distinction. Dr. Kennedy Anthony, 1981. Senator Hilary Modest, 1981 to 1982. Senator Margarita Alexander, 1982 to 1984. Honorable Louis George, 1984 to 1997. Justice Honorable Mario Michel, 1997 to 2006. Honorable Arson James, 2006 to 2011. And Dr. Robert Lewis, 2011 to present. Secretaries General are Mrs. Aldith Isaac, 1981 to 1984, Ms. Lawrence Laura, 1984 to 1995, Mrs. Sherry Alexander Highness, 1997 to 2000, Mrs. Paul Termel John, 2001 to 2008, Ms. Marcia Symphorian, 2009 to present. Very special recognition must be given to Mr. Timothy James, Officer with responsibility for the management of the National Commission, 1982 to 1984. Sir Leighton Thomas, Member, Vice Chairperson, UNESCO Executive Board, 1998 to 2001. Dr. Edsel Edmonds, Member, UNESCO Executive Board, 2009 to 2011. And Ambassador Gilbert Sugary, Permanent Delegate, St. Lucia's Permanent Delegation to UNESCO, 1995 to present. Vera LaCoy, Deputy Permanent Delegate, 1995 to present. And Cynthia Joseph, National AppsNet Coordinator, 1995 to 2012.
The Commission has always been blessed with outstanding leadership, with independent leadership. The names are legendary, going back all the way to Aldith Isaac and coming through the ages now to Ms. Symphorian, who's now in charge of the Commission. So they've been really blessed with good, solid, committed leadership.
The St. Lucia National Commission for UNESCO has been a tremendous asset to St. Lucia and remains a vibrant and dynamic unit of the Ministry of Education. Over the 34 years since its establishment, the National Commission has steadily increased its programs and projects, becoming a well-known entity both locally and overseas for its impact in the areas of education, sciences, culture, and communication and information on the lives and livelihoods of St. Lucians. The St. Lucia National Commission for UNESCO would therefore like to take this opportunity to applaud the efforts of the many personalities, past and present, members of the various subcommissions, staff of the Secretariat, and other friends of the National Commission who have over the 34 years contributed to St. Lucia's progress through the work of the St. Lucia National Commission for UNESCO. The Commission would also like to extend congratulations to the current Secretary General and staff of the St. Lucia National Commission for UNESCO for their dedication and determination in ensuring that St. Lucia continues to realize significant benefits from its membership to UNESCO.